And we should be back with the second recording session for today, a tech demo for cross sections for volumes. Since I don't actually know the cross sections of birds, I cannot really use this while drawing a bird. So we are just going to start anew. So what am I talking about here when talking about using cross sections to draw? Well, exactly what it says on the tin. So you imagine that you have a plane going through whatever you want to draw, and you will end up with, you can, if you want to, you can draw this on the outside. So as you go into the ball, you are going to have cross sections that are become larger and larger until you are at the midpoint of the ball, and then of course after that they are going to become smaller. So this is not something that I would actually do as a drawing method, but I'm going to demonstrate the idea by making some, trying to draw a ball based on this method. I usually do this for, you know, a cross section of an arm or a leg or something like that. So we would have something like that there. Might as well group the layers already. This is going to get messy with the layers. This is a fresh layer. We are going to have another one here. And we can use the side drawing as a bit of a help here. We want cross sections around here. So you notice that the circle has not yet become extremely small. So we can actually block off parts of it. And be something like that. And then we can draw our circle here. And then I think I can do this in the same layer for the bottom quarter as well. So they are not going to be overlapping too much. About that much taken away. About that much taken away from the front and back. And again, we are going to end up with a kind of a circle here. So at this point, I am going to mark out the endpoints here. So we have 5 rings here that are supposed to more or less give us a circle. You will be able to see that the topmost and the bottommost ring are not comparable here. So this is directly not a particularly successful demonstration. But I'm going to fudge it a little bit and base my work slightly more on the... Actually, it's not looking all that bad. Might well be that I actually did a bit better job than I thought, and it's just the and some of the problem is the perspective of this image. So here I am drawing the equators of this ball based on the cross sections that I drew. Yes, the result was that the bottom quarter was more successful than the top quarter, but I think this demonstration is still more or less, more or less insightful. So looks more or less like a ball. I had to fudge the top side a little bit, but this is another one of those things that if you actually made the effort to use line tools, do some measurements, not just doodle it in, you'd have a better time at it. So I am going to turn this off, start a new grow, and let's try this with a character drawing. Let's take the usual route of having a extreme pose arm here. Here I'm drawing it out of my imagination. This is something that I then will be able to draw, with the with this method, and then actually from a model, as I have my own arm available here. So just drawing it out of my imagination is probably not going to be particularly fruitful. For example, this side here, of course, is closer to my eye, that is to say the camera, than my elbow. So actually, it should end up being visually smaller at the elbow there than it ended up being. And this is exactly where the cross-section idea comes in. So you find the midpoint of the arm, and then you can again just draw it out. What do you actually have there at the midpoint? And you are going to have the bone. You are going to have the teardrop muscles on both sides. Then you are going to have the biceps lying on the teardrop muscle here. And then you are going to have the ends of the extender triceps, I think, the extender muscle on the back side here. And then, of course, you are going to have some, probably have some fat here, depending on if you are drawing on what's the how lean the character you are drawing is. So, depending on if you want to go, whole hog, actually draw in all the muscles, as I like to do for larger projects. The problem with that is, of course, it takes time. You will not actually finish doing that in a lot of cases. I am going to start a new group for this, a new layer. Let's use a blue again. It's a little bit visually distinct. So we are going to have the bone in the middle, and we are going to have some meat on both sides of it. And then we are going to have more of a meat here in the front. We are going to have, more asymmetric meat at the back. So if we were looking at this from an angle where you can actually see the separation of the extender muscles, you would have this sort of, gap. So you start seeing the teardrop muscle, and then you have the elbow somewhere around here. So our cross section here would be somewhere around here. This gets into some, anatomical question as well, as different people have different points of insertion for these muscles. So I personally have they attach in the middle. So for me, it would be something like this. But there are people who have extremely short insertions, and then they would have a longer gap. And there are people who have longer insertion and a shorter gap here. If you are drawing a real person, just look up how it works. And of course, if you can actually see any of these things on that person, if they have enough fat as compared to their amount of muscle, you might not see any of these. You might see some of them. It's really a question of lean versus muscle mass. So if you have a huge muscle mass, then you will be able to see these differentiations even on a person who has a relatively high fat amount. So think of the classical fat powerlifter. You can tell that they are massively muscular, although you cannot directly see any of that muscle. There's just a different volume and form to it than a person who had the same amount of volume, but it was mostly fat. And then, of course, if the person has absolutely no muscle at all, completely emaciated, they might still not show any of these differentiations if they have even a slight amount of fat, because there's just, the contour is smaller, so a smaller amount of fat will be able to hide it under itself. Another thing to think about, particularly in the front here, again, the length of the insertions. There's a bit of a tendon here that goes into the spindly bone of the forearm, the one that rotates for the biceps. So you have some amount of. Actually, I think you might not be able to see it under the shoulder muscle. For me, you can't anyway, since my insertions are extremely short. Some people will have more of a block of a biceps here. I have very short insertions, so you will barely be able to see it because there's more of a gentle curve along the entire length of the front of the upper arm. I think that bodybuilding competitions probably favor this kind of thing. I, for one, if I were drawing like a bodybuilder character, I would draw them with something like that. Aesthetically, I think that this kind of gentle curves look nicer, but depends on your character design if you are drawing from imagination. Well, anyway, let's assume that this person has enough fat to make the gap here barely visible. This is fairly common for let's say medium fat, medium muscle individuals. Usually the inside will be more clearly differentiated. So you have the outside of the extender muscle and the inside of the arm for both muscles. that are more clearly pronounced in the cross section. So there we have one cross section. Then I am going to draw one further up. This one is going to have some interaction with the shoulder muscles. So at this point we are probably somewhere around here. We have already cleared the head of the bone, I would imagine. But we will actually have quite a lot of the shoulder muscle overlapping this. So what would we have at this level? We are still going to have the bone. We are still going to have smaller components of the teardrop muscles as they get larger in the direction from up to down. And we might even have the biceps, sort of still in two groups here. That's why it's called the biceps, two heads. It has one head that attaches here to the bone and one head that attaches to the clavicle. The triceps also has one side that attaches to the head here and one that attaches to the shoulder blade. A lot of these things are very symmetrical, so it's nice to remember them that way. The muscles in the back here are probably going to be a bit larger than they were further down, because of exactly what I just explained here. And then we are probably going to have the shoulder muscle overlapping this entire structure on the outside. So let's take a look and compare it a little bit. We want to be relatively in the center again. We also want to have a comparable percentage of the box taken up to work the perspective in a bit of a roundabout way. So then we are going to have fairly small around here, then a bit larger here, a bit larger here, and then even larger up here. Again, that's adding some fat. I don't think this separation is going to be visible on many people at all, if any. You might be able to get generally, I think you get a bigger separation between the front and the back on the upper arm as you go further up. So you end up with a gap like this between the biceps and the triceps. And then by the end of it, at some point, it's going to be difficult to differentiate them at all. Let's see what time it is. It has been 20 minutes. I don't think it's going to be that good of an idea to get stuck on this, on actually working this through with all the muscles. As you know, it's a constant problem for me to not go hog wild with the anatomy. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and, just sort of only use these two layers to draw by. In this case, it will be a good idea to change the opacity separately. Then I will have a better idea of what is going where. The midpoint of the shoulder muscle is going to come along something like this. And we are going to draw a bit of a contour line here as well. This is a difficult contour line. Here I'm using my knowledge of anatomy, that I know that there is a relatively massive forward part of the shoulder muscle. You have a sort of a flat area over here. Then you have the middle part. In extremely muscular or lean people, you will be able to see these sort of bundles of muscle. On me, you won't. I think on most, realistic fantasy characters, for example, you wouldn't. Then you start getting into the the big back muscle. I'm drawing a blank on what this part of the body is called in English. Usually when you say you have shoulder pain, you have pain here. Or when you say you have stiff shoulders, it's actually this muscle. This is technically not a part of the shoulder. It does not... Well, it moves the shoulder up. So in that case, way, I think I suppose it is a shoulder muscle. Not really in the way that you might think of the muscle as a shoulder muscle. So you are going to have the muscle, the outline of the muscle coming in something like this. Have a bit of oval, cut oval cross section to it. And then just, winging it for the bottom part. The attachment is going to be somewhere around here. So just extend that line. And of course the forearm has this, outside to outside. So here to here, inside to inside, here to here. And then from between the teardrop muscle and the biceps into the thumb. We're going to end up with a cross section of the forearm that is, has a lot of muscle here, has a lot of muscle here. And on the outside, it's going to have some extra muscle here. So the cross section is more like this, sort of vaguely triangular. So the interaction here is going to be a bit lopsided. This goes down a little bit, then it flattens out, and then it goes down again a little bit. Would I recommend this over, going whole hog with the muscles? Not necessarily. But what I would recommend is, stop and think. I think that this is a pretty good method to draw volumes into your drawing. So if you want, let's say, let's clear the screen a bit again. You have like a character, the arm outstretched. Think about what kind of volumes you want to have here. So you might do something like, draw circles. And of course, thinking as, a camera, this is going to have a kind of a shadow here. So the hand is going to be larger than the shoulder is going to be here behind. Then you're going to have like the elbow here. You end up with something like this. You can eyeball it, but what I like to do is I like to draw these kind of, hexagons, salt crystals, something like that, and use that to, it's somehow, it's gives you sort of an intuitive sense of movement for me. So one bonus here is, of course, that when you have more points, you have more of a, directional volume here. So if you imagine this being a volume that is more high than it is wide, you can use some of that to use it to sketch up. So up until here, for example, this is where the asymmetry in the arm gets interesting. As the upper arm is more high than it is low, and the lower arm is more wide than it is high. So you're going to end up with kind of like a double structure here, where the back of the structure is going to be how is this actually going to end up looking? You have a sort of a bounding box for the lower arm here, and then you can just use the crystal structure up here as a bounding box for the upper arm. So let's say I should think of a relatively simple pose. Let's say like sitting down. So what you have, you might draw this like a salt crystal up here, and the palm is going to be interacting with the let's say chair or bed down here. You might draw your salt crystal for the entire way here. And then again break it up in the middle. And then basically you just use this one as the volume for the upper arm. But then you have to change it up down here a little bit and use this as the bounding box for the lower arm. So if I jack down the opacity on that a little bit, rope these together again, and then just start drawing. Let's put in a shoulder here. So by this point, the width, let's call this the y-axis and this the x-axis. So the length in the y-axis should come down, and its length in the x-axis should come up now that we are in the forearm part here. So you end up with thinking of it something like this. The bounding boxes you can also, so it's more of a working step. You have you go from bounding. This is basically the volume. Then you have the anatomy. If you are, you want to draw quickly, or you are very skilled, or you don't, or you aren't skilled and you don't want to use hours and hours working on it, you can just wing it. And then the last part would be actually the surface. At the point of the surface, you might want to have, be drawing contour lines. I think that's going to be the topic for tomorrow, as my current plan is to draw the anatomy part of the INA for the postcard today, and then have the contour lines to it, and then probably talk about and draw some clothes tomorrow, and then talk about shading on Thursday. So that would be another, volumetric thing. So you would use the contour lines, turn them into facets, and then the shading would interact with the facets. So that has been half an hour on this topic. I think that is going to be enough. And I hope if the explanation has not been particularly helpful, that working on it for a while is going to be more of that. So